Hey, Previews World, and welcome back to Previews World Live. This is an old idea that we had done like a few months back with Ken Lashley, but we're bringing it back because, well, we liked it so much, but also it gives you an insight into the creative process and just how difficult or how easy, no one's ever said that, it is to make comics. And it just so happens that I have a huge talent on the show this week, and I'm really happy to introduce you to Mr. John Cassaday. How's it going, John?
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm very good. How are
Cool.
you, Troy?
So I'm just going to give the introduction, but like you've done Planetary, you did Uncanny Avengers, you did Astonishing X-Men, you did Star Wars. You're a well-known artist, a fan favorite artist, and so I'm really happy to have you here. You're also a fan favorite artist. You're a favorite artist of mine as well. So
Thank
thanks
you,
again for
Troy.
joining us.
Good to be here.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your career in general, but I want to start. We're going to start backwards. So we're going to start like at current times. We're going to pull a little memento here. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved with Humanoids? Because I interviewed Mark Wade last month, about a month or so ago, and he was introducing everyone to this Humanoids H1 line, which I was told not to call it a superhero line necessarily, but for the sake of argument, and you can elaborate on this, it's a superpowers line, right? The H1 is like delving into really for the first time because they're largely known for European sci-fi. So how did you get involved? And you can tell me more about your history of humanoids and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I've worked with the Humanoids company before. About 15 years ago, I did a series of books called Iron Legions, a World War II sort of horror story, and had a great relationship with them ever since. And when they proposed the H1 line, uh, uh, the way they threw it at me is kind of similar to what you're saying, is that it's not necessarily superheroes. I guess it depends on what your definition of a superhero is. With Ignited and some of the other books coming up, these are people who uh, they they're ignited, they're given powers, but it's not as if they're just deciding to save the world. They're just you know high school kids trying to get through life,
Right, trying to
and
survive.
we're trying to survive, and they're faced with challenges of today, challenges that we read in the newspaper and see on TV every day. I think they're just trying to, in terms of the themes of the books, taking ordinary people and giving them extraordinary powers, which tends to be a theme that runs through most of comics. Are the heroes? I don't know, but they have powers, and they're trying to survive.
Right, and I definitely got the impression it's like a reflection of reality in a lot of ways. I know that they ignited, like the catalyst for that particular story is like school shootings, and like so it definitely seems
Yeah.
like it's mirroring reality in a lot of different ways, which Mark explained to us earlier that like that was kind of the point.
Yeah, I
So
mean, face front, right in the beginning, Ignited. It's pretty obvious and clear that it's these kids are the victims of these mass school shootings, and like it's just so frustrating to sort of over and over see the same thing play out and not have a voice to it, and a certain degree of empathy for these characters. So I think a lot of what Ignited is born out of is just the the frustration of what we sort of see every day in the news.
no, yeah, and I'm sure it will be cathartic for a lot of readers, which is like really interesting and really awesome. So I actually wanted to ask you, like, what is your role here? Like, what does your role entail in terms of your relationship with humanoids or H1 more specifically?
So my title is Chief Creative Officer, but basically I'm a consultant.
Hmm.
So I lend my eyes and my ears and give a voice to things when I see that something might need to be chipped away at, or finessed a bit here and there. Really, just yeah, I'm just an extra voice, just kind of sort of the same way Mark is, and we're trying to help steer the ship.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, we're going to get back to humanoids in a little bit in H1, but I wanted to talk to you first about your early career. Like, well, actually, before your career, like, what prompted you to draw? Like, what got you into art? Like, was it like did you have a fine art background? Did you love comics? Like, what got you into this world?
Um, I mean, there's no one single thing, but I guess it's a part of just like growing up. I watched the Batman TV show, so next thing I knew, I was buying a Batman comic or drawing Batman. or drawing anything that was in front of me, and I just sort of had a whether I was good at it or not, I just really enjoyed it. And I also grew up on a farm in the middle of Texas, and I had to make my own fun. So that's part comics, that's part drawing. I just had to sort of make it up as I went. Um, I don't know that I don't know that there was a time when I decided, okay, I'm going to become a comic artist or whatever.
Hmm.
It just sort of as I grew up, I just loved doing it so much, and was fortunate enough to find an avenue to break in.
It's great that you said Batman. Well, A, because Mark mentioned that like Batman 66, the TV show, got him the comics in the first place. But
I
also,
think that's a whole generation of people. I mean, I
oh
watch in
yeah,
the afternoons on the reruns, and I mean, when you're a kid, when you're a 4 or 5 year old kid, you don't know that it's campy. You just
right.
it's real. It's as real as
Yeah.
anything. It's fantastic. And um, so yeah, anytime I'd see anything Batman, I had to have it in comics.
Also, I want to point out one of my prized possessions is actually Planetary Batman, which you
Oh,
drew.
thanks.
And like, I just love your depiction of Batman specifically. He's just stocky and intimidating until he crosses Chiquita Wagner. So, yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. So,
Thank
what
you.
was your first break into comics? Like what was the assignment that got you into the world of comics, or what was your first big
Um,
break?
San Diego, 1996 was my first Comic Con, my first San Diego Comic Con, and I went. Uh, I'd been to conventions in Texas and whatever, but San Diego was my first in 1996, and I was walking around and I passed the booth that Chris Warner had. He was an artist at Dark Horse, also a part of the editorial at the time, and created Barbed Wire and many other things. And I was a fan of his Moon Knight comics he had done. And so I stopped and I showed him my portfolio, and he was uh, very generous with his time. And a few minutes later, it was just like, come with me. And he took me to the Dark Horse booth, and they sort of hired me practically on the spot. And a month later, I was doing covers for the title Ghost.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Actually, I do want to point out real quick because I almost forgot. We are doing a giveaway for this particular interview with John. So John, of course, is the creative director on the H1 line. And so we're going to be sure to give you guys a copy of the free comic book day version of H1 Ignition, but also keeping it in the Humanoids family. We have Humanoids Presents the
Oh, yeah.
Jodoverse, right? Which is actually, I need to read this because
Jodorowsky, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I fell in love with Jodorowsky after Son of the Gun. Also Jodorowsky, Screaming Planet, and a more recent release from them, Sanctum Redux. So you can win all four of these. All you have to do is tell us in the comments what is your favorite John Cassaday comic, like favorite one of all time, whatever it is. Let us know. I mentioned Planetary earlier. There's a lot of otherworldly visuals in Planetary. And so when I see that level of detail and that level of, honestly, I got to say, each page seems like a love letter, not just on Warren Ellis' side, but also your side of a love letter to like genre fiction in general. But I had to ask, like, how much input did you have in the creative process with Planetary?
Well, I remember reading the pitch and the first issue of Planetary, and it just felt like Warren had popped open my skull and read my mind. It was everything that I loved, and he and I had began a series that never came out for Caliber Comics about a year or so earlier. So we had phone conversations. I don't know if he pulled things in. We talked about everything, but I don't know how much of it was me. I think so much of it was just Warren's love letter as well. He comes off as he's not exactly a lover of superheroes, but he's a lover of the fiction of comics and the whole family of the different genres. And that was just so appealing to me. There are times later on in the series where he would just ask me, is there a genre we haven't hit yet that you'd like to? And I would make suggestions and so on. Uh, but yeah, it was. I've said this before. Every time I would get a script, it was like Christmas.
No, I love it. I mean, every time I read that comic, it was like Christmas. So, like, I share that sentiment. Like, you open and
It
you're
was
like,
a challenge. It was a challenge too, and I wrote this in the dedication to, I think it was our final trade paperback collection. Yeah, I dedicated it to Warren because he made me a better artist. Every time I would get a script, it was a whole new world, a whole new rhythm of something that I hadn't drawn before, and I had to do research, and and I had to sort my way through it.
Oh yeah, no, that book is awesome. Like I have two giant hardcover absolute versions of it, and I love it. We're gonna jump ahead a little bit. I wanted to ask you about like Astonishing X-Men. I know a lot of people love it. I have friends who always talk about the scene where Cyclops levels the Sentinel in the backyard. Like I know people love Astonishing X-Men, and I wanted to know, how did you get involved with that? Did Joss Whedon approach you? Did Marvel approach you? Like, how did that work out?
So, well, speaking of Planetary, Josh was a big fan, and of course I was a fan of Joss's, and we sort of kept orbiting each other through various other people like Jeff Loeb and other people in the film and comic business. And finally, one year in San Diego, we met up, had dinner. I had dinner with his whole crew, and we became fast friends. They were just beginning to shoot Firefly, and I went and visited the set, and whenever he was in town, we'd have dinner. Or I was in LA, we'd have dinner, and we would just be like, "So, what do you want to do? Like, what are you into? What should we do?" You know, essentially kind of sorting out what something original that we might put together. And then Marvel approached us, specifically Joe Cassaday approached us about doing, a new um, uh, X-Men book, and it was sort of that, like, I don't know, are you going to do it? I might do it. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Are you doing it? And we did the dance a little bit, but eventually, and my schedule was nuts. I was still doing Planetary. I was working on imagery for Humanoids. I was like, I can't. Where do I put this? How do I get this in? And X-Men is one of those titles where if you're a working artist in comics, you're like, gosh, well, if I could, I'd like to do a run of X-Men at some point. But I wasn't ready for it just yet. But then on the other hand, I was like, if not with Joss, then who? Like, this is the time to do it. So I signed on, and it was a great thing. And we were friends before, and it's a tricky thing when you decide to take on a project or work with someone who's a friend. We got along well, but you don't know if you always work well together. You don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And luckily, it turned out wonderful, and we loved working together and became even better friends. So it was a blessing all around.
Cool. And I can see Astonishing X-Men right over your shoulder too, which is awesome. I just want to reiterate, we're doing a giveaway. It's an H1 or a Humanoids bundle, with H1 being the prominent title here. And definitely let us know what your favorite John Cassaday title is, your favorite John Cassaday work is. It can be a cover, it can be interiors, it can be any of those things. Just let us know in the comments, and we'll pick a winner and we will send it your way. So, all right, we're going to play a little game of true or false, because I sent you an email before and you told me not to trust Wikipedia.
Right.
So I already know the answer to this, but just to set the record straight, Wikipedia said, right, that you directed and acted. Which one of these things is not true?
Directed.
Okay.
I act, but only in real life. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So
I've done a few play readings and things in New York, but nothing.
All right, awesome. I could actually see that, so that makes a lot of sense. You talked earlier about Batman and how that was like, one of the characters that you drew a lot as a kid. But like, as an adult, what is your favorite character to draw? Like, is there one that you just always gravitate towards?
There are two, and I'm going to be a little cryptic here. One is Captain America. He's my favorite.
Okay, nice.
And I've been fortunate enough to take the reins on him a few times. And the other is a character that no one has seen yet, that is my thing that I'm working on now. And so I've become that guy who is working on something that I can't talk about just yet.
I mean, your Captain America is like painstakingly detailed. Like it's funny actually. One of our co-hosts is a cosplayer, and like she mentioned like the having to put together scales on like things, and like it was funny because I remember your Captain America and like how every little scale on his costume was drawn to detail. Like it's just amazing.
People talk. I see people talking about it, as if, I mean, he was there before. It's always been there. I mean,
right.
It just depends on the degree of how far you want to go with it. But yeah, I mean, sorry, it was there before. It's not my creation.
Right. No, and like, yeah, of course, but like at the same time,
so
like
for all the artists who came after me doing Cap, they're like, "Damn you!" Like, no.
right. Like you set the bar at a certain level, and now everybody. But you're like, that's not my fault. Like it was always there.
Sorry,
So,
guys.
so like, let's talk a little bit more about like your craft and like, what tools and media do you use to like make stuff? Is there a preferred, a preferred like tool or anything that you go to? Like what makes the John Cassaday style at the drawing board?
Troy, I keep it pretty traditional. I do still most of my work, with ink on paper.
Mm.
I use brushes, Winsor Newton Series 7. I pencil, I ink. I'll occasionally on covers and some interiors when I feel it's needed. I'll throw in some charcoal or something extra. I do a bit of digital with Photoshop and whatever, but I'd say normally it's 85, 90% still on paper.
Okay, cool, cool. So all right. Well, first of all, I want to point out that like another one of my favorite things that you've ever done is actually the Star Wars book that came out a few years ago from Marvel, and there's an image in that book where Darth Vader lifts an AT-AT or an AT-AT, and like it's like it's got weight and it's dramatic and it's absolutely amazing, and you've been in the position where you created a lot of iconic. You've been able to like tackle a lot of iconic characters, like Captain America definitely being one of them. Um, but I want to know like is that something you're shooting for? Are you going for something iconic, or like like how do you approach the page?
I think again, I think it depends on your definition of what that means. Iconic can be anything. What's true to the character, what's in that story, what's in that script. If you get a chance to really go for something, that's a lot of fun. But sometimes something very quiet can be iconic as well.
Hmm.
Um, it's funny you mentioned Star Wars because just similar to the old Batman TV show, that's what kept me involved in comics.
Hmm.
Um, Growing up, I couldn't just watch the movies at home over and over, so I had the comic book adaptations. As a kid on the school bus, I probably drew the movie Empire Strikes Back. I probably drew it 3 times over as my own comic,
Hmm.
and that before I knew it, I was like, I know how to draw an AT-AT.
You're right.
Uh, it just came naturally. But getting back to your question about things that are iconic, it also helps to be working with characters that lend themselves so easily to it, like a Captain America or the incredible toy box that is Star Wars.
Hmm.
When we took it on, it was like, okay, like let's not get too greedy with the toys, but we have that toy box. We
Right.
can play with what we want. And Jason Aaron was so smart. He set our first arc, the first half of our first arc, in an Imperial weapons factory. So
Hmm.
it was literally the
Right.
toy box. So yeah, but. But I'll tell you, even though I said, I learned how to draw an AT-AT, it was a challenge. I remember doing I think it was the second cover to our Star Wars, where it was a row of stormtroopers, and basically that was the cover. That's where I taught myself to instinctively just draw stormtroopers from left to right. I'm like, all right, this guy just got it. Repetition, repetition, got it.
Uh,
Helmet, helmet. Um, yeah, but it was an experience. Just growing up loving that stuff and thinking you know it so well, and then realizing you don't. You have to relearn it.
wow. Like, so do you still have the old school, the original Star Wars books that you drew? Like, do you still have those, or are they long gone?
They're in my mother's attic somewhere. I'm
All right.
sure I should pull them out. I have to tell you, they're drawn on notebook paper too. So
Hmm.
I'd have to take some white out to it here and there to make it. But I'm not looking. I'll reach out to Marvel next week and see if they can
There you go, and they can publish it all. The artist sketchbook. There you go.
completion.
So let's go back to H1 for a second here. Uh, you are the creative director, but are there any plans for you to draw any of the H1 books, or like is that something that's possibly in the cards?
Possible.
Okay.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so yeah, again alluding to saying which character I like to draw. I'm working on something now that
Okay.
that I that's quite close to me and I care a lot about. I won't be able to talk about it for a while,
Okay.
but it's something very special and something I'm doing for the company. I don't know if it will be under the H1 line or not, but it's a project I'm working on now, and maybe next time we talk, I can speak more about it.
Okay. All right. Cool. Then I look forward to that conversation. Like we'll set it up on Previews World, see what else
Sounds
is
good.
inside the mind of John Cassaday. Just another reminder, one more time, before we close out here. We're doing a Humanoids bundle. You have the free comic book day, Ignition, which is a look inside Ignite. It's got a Yannick Paquette cover, but definitely a part of the H1 line. Also, Screaming Planet, Humanoids presents the Jodoverse, and Sanctum Redux. So definitely let us know what your favorite John Cassaday storyline is, or cover, whatever your favorite John Cassaday moment is. Let us know in the comments, and we will pick one person to win this bundle. So I guess the last question will be about Humanoids, H1. Like, what separates this line from the rest of the, for any other superhero line? I mean, you've tackled a lot of different superheroes. Like you've done the DC side, you've done the Marvel side, but what makes H1 different?
I think it goes back a bit to what we were discussing before, and how these characters are just reacting to the headlines of today. Um, they're in our world now, and they're reacting the way we can imagine teenagers, people in high school. Uh, uh, if you're given these powers and you're faced with the issues of today, um, what does that mean to you? I think the idea is that it's sort of grounded in a different way. There are powers. We're sort of used to that in comics, obviously, but I think that um, we find a certain relatability to the characters in these books, not just Ignited, but there's a book coming out called Strange Lands and another book called Ankney, that I'm really looking forward to see coming out, that put real people in real situations. It just so happens they have these extraordinary powers. I also would say about the H1 line, there's a degree of diversity that is not just reflected in the characters in the comics, but in the people, the crew that are working on them. We want different viewpoints. Um, we want to sort of pull as best we can uh, uh, people from all walks of life and with different viewpoints to bring out what's special about these characters, and to see how they're reacting to what is the headline of today, what's happening tomorrow, what's probably going to be in the newspaper, on TV tomorrow, over and over again, and we just sort of want to find a way to express those viewpoints from all different points of view.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Like, yeah, there is definitely a range of like unique voices, and like the first issue, like, was kind of a punch in the gut of Ignited, for that reason. Because I mean, like, you'd have to be dead to not feel something when it comes to like school shootings and whatnot. Like, it's just
Yeah,
it's
and
like very
and
emotional.
we become numb to these things, but so in a comic form, you go for it, you kind of put it right in your face, but we've just become so normalized to these things. You sort of want to point out, like,
Yeah.
what's it like to have a bullet in your face, for God's sake.
All right. Seems like the superpower is actually caring about things. Look at that.
Yeah.
John, thank you very much. Thanks for coming out here. Well, thanks for Skyping with us, or whatever you want to call it that we're doing.
Working
I
on
appreciate it.
PBS or something. It's like,
Right,
please
right.
donate to your local radio station.
Right. Well, we're definitely gonna give people the business here, because I was gonna say, definitely like, share, and subscribe. Let people know more about H1, and also, of course, want to point out that Strange Lands is in the comic shops right now. It actually dropped this week when we're recording this. But also, you can also pick up Ignited right now at your local comic shop. And thanks again, John. I really appreciate you coming down and talking to us online, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Troy, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. And also, thank you for watching. I just want to send a reminder out one more time. I know I said I was going to do it once, but I really want you guys to win this because this is a cool bundle. It's all humanoid stuff. We've got a mishmash of the European stuff, which they're well known for, but also their new line from the Americas, Ignition. So definitely check that out. And you can get Ignited and Strange Lands in comic shops now. Ankney is going to be coming around the corner. John Cassaday mentioned that. And the way you can win, simply let us know what your favorite John Cassaday story is. Like, I can tell you right now, one of my favorites is Uncanny Avengers. Remember when Red Skull pulled Xavier's brain out and held it up at the very end of like the first arc? I love that. That's great stuff. So like, share, and subscribe. And that's it for Previews World Live. Be sure to tune in to Previews World Weekly every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And I'll see you at the spinner rack. See you guys.
Hey Previews World, did you enjoy this video? Then let's be friends. Follow Previews World by clicking that subscribe button.